In a previous video, we explored the myth of Kronos, who is Saturn, who severed Uranus's genitals and cast it into the sea. It's more than a myth. It encodes a separation of spirit and matter and the birth of our reality. But what if the story is etched in the architecture of our world, hidden in stone, standing in plain sight? Welcome to Star World Astrology. My name is Shari. I'm a Western tropical astrologer with a special interest in shadow work. But today I'm going to focus on astrology, esotericism, and astro-theology. I have related this severance of the genital, meaning the phallus, to represent the obelisk. Why the obelisk? Have you ever wondered why so many world powers from ancient Egypt to the Vatican, all the way to Washington, D.C., erected giant stone pillars in public squares and government centers? Was it just architectural fashion, or were they symbolically embedding something into the land? The common historical narrative says Rome was fascinated with Egyptian traditions and stole their monuments after conquest, especially after taking Egypt in 30 BCE. And while that's true, there's a deeper code behind the obelisk, one rooted in cosmic principle, masculine and feminine polarity, and the birth of creation itself. So let's go back to the myth. In the myth, Saturn represents time, severed Uranus's phallus and cast it into the sea, or the cosmic womb. From that, Aphrodite, who is Venus, was born, and this represents desires, emotions, our pleasures, things that are beautiful, what we love, what we like. In astro-theology, this is also Eve, but I won't get into that today. So the phallic descends into the womb, meaning the cosmic womb, and this represents the union of spirit and matter, which is a creative act. In Hermetic terms, this is as above, so below. Now, symbolically, the obelisk is that phallus, a beam of spirit crystallized in stone. It represents the sun's ray entering the field of matter. It's the condensed vertical axis where the divine impregnates the world of form. Saturn and Rhea united, which is time and space. I spoke about this in my previous video, The Black Sun. I also explained that Saturn, who is time, when it unites with Rhea, space, which is his sister and wife, together time and space gives birth to form, the matrix that we now experience in form. But the severance of the phallus from Uranus, who is the god of heaven, that is talking about the backstory behind our physical reality. And the obelisk becomes more than just a monument. It's a symbol of the masculine force entering space, bringing order to chaos and creating structure from spirit. So the Egyptians called the obelisk Tek-Henu, meaning to pierce the sky. It was closely tied to the sun god Ra, and the tip of the obelisk was covered with gold or electrum to catch the first and last ray of the sun. It stood as a symbol of life, light, and resurrection. They were often erected in pairs, representing the sun and moon, masculine and feminine, and were placed at the entrance of temples to declare protection, power, and divine order. Now, this is also symbolizing us as divine beings with our masculine and feminine within us, and we are the temple. But as masculine dominance prevailed, single obelisks became more common. They became the tool of domination rather than union. So when Rome conquered Egypt, they stole many of their obelisks and planted them in their own cities to declare supremacy. And the obelisks symbolized masculine dominance. Although some were stolen from Egypt, some were actually built and placed throughout the world. However, the obelisk at the Vatican was taken from Egypt and replanted in Rome in the center of St. Peter's Square. And the center of St. Peter's Square is designed intentionally to have the shape of sacred geometry, to show the Vesica Piscis. It also is the astrological wheel, and also it shows time. Another obelisk is in the heart of Washington, D.C., is implanted in the same manner at the very center of the sacred geometry, the Vesica Piscis. Most people miss this hidden symbolism and potential energetic activation of the masculine dominance, control, and power made in plain sight for those who have eyes to see. So what is hidden in plain sight? Here's something most people never question. The Washington Monument isn't just randomly tall. It's exactly 555 feet and 5 1/8 inches high. And at its base, it's 55 wide. And that's not accident. It's sacred math encoded in stone. So let's break this down. The number 5 has always symbolized the human form. It's the 5 fingers, the 5 limbs, the 5 senses. It's the number of the microcosm, meaning us. 555 amplifies, hinting at the spiritual awakening through the human vessel. Even the extra 1/8 inch feels like a nod to something deeper, a golden ratio, the divine blueprint between so much of nature's design. This is a beautiful metaphor for ascension, resonance, and return. You don't just happen to build a structure that tall with that kind of precision without a reason. So the spiritualized human is represented by the 5. Awakening from the material illusion is the 555, and piercing the veil through sacred resonance is the 1/8 octave of return. This makes it less of a national monument and more of a geometric altar hidden in plain sight. Then there's the base, which is 55 feet. That's a double 5. In numerology, 5 is about big transitions and spiritual wake-up calls. It's the soul's nudge to step into higher alignment. So from the base to the tip, the whole monument is like a human tuning rod, grounded in the elements, reaching towards spirit. The Washington Monument also was designed to rise from a square base and narrowing to a point in the sky that depicts the condensed beam of light entering matter. So the square base of the obelisk also symbolizes the 4 elements, which is earth, fire, air, water. The fourfold manifestation of matter emerged through the quintessence, the 5th element, which is the ethers or spirit. So the obelisk rises vertically like the pillar of fire or light, but it is demonstrating the etheric current of white light from the descent as it refracts into the 7 visible colors, which is the electric current that creates the electromagnetic universe. So its square foundation anchors this descent into the material world, crystallizing the divine impulse into structure and order. So this mirrors the Hermetic principle, as above, so below. Spirit, the vertical beam, must ground through the fourfold cross of matter, which is the square base. Now, the 4 elements are earth, which brings structure, water, which is flow and also our emotions, air, which is our thought, our communication and intelligence, and fire is our will, its transformation, and also spirit in motion. These 4 are activated by ether, the divine field, the all-containing breath of the Logos. So the obelisk is not merely a phallic symbol, it's a hermetic device. Anchoring divine light, which is the solar etheric frequency, and channels it through the 4 pillars into the element of form, uniting heaven and earth in a single vertical axis. So the obelisk gives focus to spirit above the 5th element, And it's the element we tend to overlook since we're conditioned to focus on the material things. The obelisk channels divine essence down into the matrix of matter, anchoring the unseen into form. It is the union of heaven and earth, and masculine and feminine at the foundation of everything. It's no coincidence that George Washington was the first president of the United States, and he was a Freemason. That's a historical fact. And it matters, especially when we're decoding the deeper meaning of the Washington Monument. Freemasonry is layered with esoteric symbolism, much of it rooted in ancient Egypt and sacred geometry, solar worship, and the principle of building the inner temple. So the 555, 555-foot obelisk, as an Egyptian sun symbol, is erected in the honor of a known Freemason. It is not just national pride, it's a spiritual code. So Washington was seen not just as a military leader or statesman, but as a symbolic master builder. The monument isn't just a tribute to the man, it's a pillar of light, it's a solar phallus, a transmitter between heaven and earth. And Freemasonry is at its esoteric core. It's all about the bridging between spirit and matter, heaven and earth, light and form. So yes, George Washington was a Freemason, and the obelisk bearing his name is a message encoded for those who have eyes to see. It's also shaped like the human spine for a reason. And this is another interesting observation. So from an aerial view, we can see that the Vatican obelisk and the Washington Monument are placed in the center of the sacred geometry, Vesica Piscis, which holds the key to our divine union. Here is something most people miss entirely. Now we know that the obelisk in St. Peter's Square in Rome was taken from Egypt. It's a towering stone needle placed right in the center of Vatican City. When it was taken from Egypt, it originally stood in Heliopolis, the Egyptian city of the sun. The official story is that it symbolized Christianity's triumph over paganism, and Rome seized it during the conquest, and they planted it in the heart of the Vatican, as if to say, our religion has conquered yours. But here's the irony. The Vatican obelisk is also functioning as a sundial, literally. Its shadow marks the hours and zodiacal signs around the square. Now, if the obelisk was just a trophy of conquest, why is it still working with the sun? Why is it tracking time, light, and zodiac alignment? The very thing astrology is based on. This is where the deeper code becomes obvious, because sun, the S-U-N, and sun, S-O-N, are linguistically and symbolically interchangeable in both esoteric Christianity and astro-theology. The S-O-N of God and the S-U-N of God are both the light of the world. They're born at the winter solstice, and they rise in Aries, and they're exalted in the heavens. So while they say the obelisk represents the church's domination over ancient spiritual systems, it's still pointing to the same cosmic intelligence. It's still tuned to the sun, the zodiac, and the great celestial rhythm, the one that both pagans and mystics have always known as divine. So here's where it gets even more interesting. Both the Vatican obelisk in Rome and Washington, D.C. aren't just placed randomly. They are not just astrological centerpieces. They're deliberately planted at the center of a specific sacred geometry called the Vesica Piscis. Now, from an aerial view, you can actually see it, the two intersecting circles forming that almond-shaped center, which is regarded as the eye or the womb, or also the portal. And the obelisk is planted right in the heart of this intersection. It is the phallus of spirit that has been inserted into the cosmic womb of matter. And I don't think that's an accident. It isn't just symbolic, it's metaphysical architecture. It's a living blueprint laid into the earth with intention. The Vesica Piscis is one of the most powerful and ancient shapes in sacred geometry, found in the flower of life. This is displayed in cathedrals in early Christian art and also in the shape of the feminine yoni. So, what are they really showing us? The light, which is spirit, pierces into form through the sacred gateway. That creation happens where polarities unite, masculine and feminine, heaven and earth, sun and moon, spirit and matter. In their union, they give birth to the material world. The obelisk marks the point of insemination, and the Vesica Piscis is the divine womb where soul and form merge. So the Vesica Piscis is represented in the sacred geometrical shape of the fish, where the two circles intersect and overlap to make that shape, which looks like an almond, but it's also a seed. It's also the fish, and it's also an eye. It's the seed of life that becomes the flower of life. It also shows how cells divide, creating duality that emerges from one single unified source. So the almond shape in the middle is the cosmic yoni. It is the portal of all creation. It is also the 0 point and the eye of God. It is a place where duality merges into Christ consciousness as a field of union. So let's connect the Bible. In Genesis 1, verse 1 and 2, it says, "In the beginning, God created heaven and earth, and the earth was without form and void. Darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God hovered over the waters." This is the same sea in which Uranus's phallus, the divine spark, was cast into. It is the primordial cosmic womb, the matrix, the mother, and the Vesica Piscis, symbolizing the formless chaos of potential from which spirit births matter. Saturn creates the boundary and container of time to give it form. Saturn, the ruler, after severing the creative spark from Uranus and casting it into the sea of creation, Saturn becomes the overlord of this reality because he is the one who actually shapes reality through creating boundary and container for time to exist in the physical matrix. So this myth is the origin story of creation. Only when spirit yields to matter does creation become alive. Hence the severance of Uranus, the ruler of heavens and spirit, by Saturn, who now is the overlord, the demiurge of the material universe. So when the solar ray, represented by the obelisk, descends from spirit, it enters into matter through the magnetic field. And the magnetic field is symbolized by the Vesica Piscis, a shape formed by two overlapping circles. One circle represents spirit and the other is matter. And where they overlap, that almond shape is the cosmic doorway. And it is also the portal where spirit and matter unite. So the obelisk, or the ray of light, enters into this space, and that's where physical reality begins. This is also the space where duality meets and something new is born. Some traditions call this the Christic principle of the inner light of consciousness. So when we see the obelisk placed in the center of the Vesica Piscis from an aerial view like Washington, D.C. or the Vatican, it's not just artistic design, it's an esoteric code. The ray, the masculine, enters the field, the feminine, and creation happens. It's a spiritual current stepping into the world of form. Now, this is where Pisces, the zodiac sign, is represented by the ocean. In mythology, the severed phallus of Uranus was cast into the sea, and that sea isn't just water, it's symbolic. It's the primordial field of creation, it's the womb of possibility. It is also related to Pisces, the last sign of the zodiac that rules the ocean. It is also the place where form dissolves and where duality merges so that the next cycle can begin. So the sea, the Vesica Piscis, and the feminine matrix, they're all points of the same idea. Creation begins when spirit enters the womb of potential. Pisces is symbolically represented by the two fish mirroring the two circles of the Vesica Piscis. The union births Christ consciousness. Creation begins where spirit enters the womb of potential. So the ancients didn't worship the sun because they were primitive. They knew the sun was the visible face of the one light and the true source of life. Each soul is a ray of the sun and the Son of God and the emanation of source. And the obelisk is the sunbeam crystallized into matter. The soul is that ray made conscious in human form. So the Library of Alexandria was destroyed. Ancient records were burned or buried, and we might assume it suppressed deeper truths. Egyptian temples were conquered and obelisks were stolen. So why go through all that effort if it was just a myth? Because true metaphysical knowledge of who we are, beings of light, born of the sun, is powerful, and power structures suppress what they cannot control. This is not about worshiping the sun. It's about remembering where you come from. You are a ray of the one light, a soul, a sun, a child of source. The obelisk is just a reminder, a cosmic code hidden in plain sight. Most people don't see it because they've forgotten how to look. But you, if you stayed long enough to listen, you're remembering. Well, thank you for joining me, and I hope that you'll consider liking and subscribing, and see you next time. Thank you.